How's it going, everybody? My name's Dave Whipple and you're watching Bushradical. And thanks for coming back for another episode in the Bushradical Knife Shop series. Today what we're going to be doing is grinding bevels. Now, even though I'm just getting started off, by doing this series I'm getting a lot of questions about how I'm grinding bevels. I'm going to show you guys how I do that today, the jig I use, and just the whole process of it. Stay tuned. Alright, for starters, when you're grinding a bevel with a jig, you either need a jig that can adjust to an angle, or you need a platen that can adjust to an angle. Or in my case, I've made a table that adjusts to an angle. I don't have a way to adjust the platen efficiently, like on some other machines, and I'm not gonna go and buy a $100 jig when I only spent about 60 bucks on my grinder in the first place. So let me show you the absolutely ridiculously simple grinding setup I have. Not everybody's got a grinder like this, but if it's an idea you can borrow and adapt to what you're doing, by all means do it. Let me show you guys how this works. Alright, if you've been watching this series, you've seen this grinder. This is an old Hammond grinder made in Kalamazoo, Michigan. If you have a machine that's something like this, or a Grizzly or something to that effect, and you have to do your adjustments with the table or a jig, this is how I do these adjustments with a tiltable table. I've got a 5-degree mark and I've got a 10-degree mark on a standard carpenter's speed square. I get the table about where I want it, reach around the back side and lock the table in place. Then what I'll do is I will throw my carpenter's speed square up there, butt it up against the platen, like so, adjust to that 5-degree line, like so. Or I could go farther to that 10-degree line and then lock the table in place. I just take my table, rock my table up, I butt the bottom of the speed square up against the platen, and I'm either taking it to my 10-degree mark or I'm going to take it to my 5-degree mark. That's basically the only two marks I'm using at the moment. I think on this one, we're going to use that 5-degree mark. I'm going to get that belt right perfect on that mark. Then I'll reach underneath the table here and lock it down tight. Now I'm going to be grinding a 5-degree bevel on both sides, so it's around 10 degrees all told. And I'm going to be doing that with a 90-degree jig. A jig that holds the blade upright at 90 degrees. Once the table's set, I don't even have to think about it. I just put the knife in the jig, make sure the jig stays nice and flat as I'm shaping the blade, flat against the table that is, and the bevels come out great. Here are some knives I've been working on. Some of these have been heat treated, or they've had the finished bevel put on them. Some of these are ready to go in the heat treat, but you can see that jig is turning out a good consistent bevel. And this is the jig I'm using. It's just a block of 2x4. Now I've cut the corner out of this block of wood on a table saw, and it's a true 90. And then the piece of wood that came out of it, it just fits right in here like so. So I'm going to take a knife blank like this that has not been ground. I'll throw it in my jig like so. Put the block of wood on the other side of it. Take a small C-clamp and just C-clamp that sucker down. And now it's ready to grind. Now for roughing in the bevel, I'm just going to adjust my grinder to the fastest speed that it has. On this particular setting, this belt grinder is running about 4,600 feet per minute. I need to get a respirator for guys with beards. This is what I have at the moment. Feels like the belt's in pretty good shape. I guess I'll just use this belt. Keep myself a jug of water here to keep the blade cool as I'm going about this. Let's grind this bevel.
So what I'm doing here, of course, I'm going to start with adjusting my tracking. I have to track the belt to one side or the other of the platen because the platen is a touch wider than my belt is, and I'm holding that jig down with downward pressure with my jig hand, and I'm forcing the blade into the platen with that chunk of stick. You can also use your fingertips for this, but I find I can grind a little bit more evenly with just a little extra pressure. And with your fingertips, if you happen to push a little too much, you'll feel it. It'll get pretty hot. So I always try to keep that blade as cool as possible, and I like that stick just for the control of it. But the other hand is really just holding down my grinding jig. You can see me adjusting the tracking to move that belt over so it matches the other side of the platen for grinding, the other side of the knife. And one great thing about this particular belt grinder is I can put any size belt on it, from like a 20-inch belt to a 60-inch belt. And I happen to find a great deal on some 48-inch belts, so that's what I'm running today. But technically this is a 60-inch belt grinder. But right now it's running 48 by 2s. And the closer I get towards the tip of the knife, of course, the more risk you run of burning that steel. And I don't want to do that, so I'm keeping it in and out of the water as much as possible. And a lot of times I'll find that I tend to work the tip by itself and then blend that grind into the rest of the grind, just because the tip really needs that extra bit of attention. The steel is getting the thinnest at that point, and it's the easiest to burn, and it's kind of nice to just sometimes take extra special care and do the tip lightly, dip it, do it lightly and dip it. And then once the tip is good, then kind of blend it into the rest of the grind. Now even this rudimentary, super simple jig that's just made out of a block of wood, so long as it's a true 90, I found that it is turning out as good a work as I can make it turn out. There's no problem with the setup that I've run into, other than I'm grinding a lot of this by eye, of course, and it's going to be as accurate as my eye is, which probably isn't saying much. But the jig itself, it does fine.
So here we have it. Kind of a high Scandi, kind of a low Saber. I'm definitely no professional at this, but I can see the problems I'm having consistently are maybe getting this plunge line, the grind here, just a little bit high. Now I've got more grinding to do, so I suppose if I stay away from that plunge line a bit, I'll bring this line up and match what I already have here. And what I'm doing while I'm grinding is I'm always trying to keep what's left in the middle and what's left about the same thickness all the way down. Of course, some of this can be fixed on the final grind, but I'm just trying to get it as best I can the first time around. I've got about a dime's width, kind of hard to see, but about a dime's width left on the edge. And I think that's about good. Of course, you can see too the Bushradical stamp that I've gotten all my blades now. And I think that's pretty good. That's ready for heat treat and then final grinding. Now, of course, if you're an experienced knife maker, I'm not showing you anything new. I'm probably doing a whole bunch of stuff that you would say, hey, do it this way, do it a different way. Anybody that's made knives for a long time probably knows more than I'm ever gonna know about it. I'm trying to keep things simple and easy to understand for you guys, and of course for myself, because I'm no pro and I'm just getting started. But for everybody that's wondered how I'm grinding bevels, that's the process I'm using. Works pretty good. The only variable is my own eye. I try to keep the grind the same height on both sides. I try to keep the meat right in the middle. I don't scribe the center because I'm generally always looking at the height of the grind. So I don't think the center mark is exactly something I would look at unless I made a point to do it. I'm always checking the height on both sides to make sure it's even. And I'm using a 90-degree jig and the bench is set. And if the heights are the same size, they're meeting in the middle without following a center scribed line. That's the way I'm doing it. If there's any way that you can apply that same principle to what you're doing and you think it's a good idea, hope this video helped. My name's Dave Whipple and you've been watching Bushradical. And be radical, eh? See you soon.